Mhm.
Oh, there we go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Just a little reminder, if possible, please change your names to show your first and last name. This will help us with completing attendance, just so we know where to send our attendance certificates. Thanks so much.
No, not the attendance certificates.
Oh, not the attendance certificates. My bad, Jamie. This is for the email survey. If we have your first and last name, we know where to send our follow-up surveys. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Jess.
Hello here. Just a little reminder again, if possible, please change your names to show your first and last name. This will help us with sending out surveys for after, so we know what you guys think. Okay. And you should have seen as well that the event is going to be recorded. You may have just gotten a notification there to tell you as such. Okay. So I was hoping to start today with a land acknowledgement. So Vancouver's Point Grey campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And I come with respect for this land that I'm on today and for the people who have and do reside here. I acknowledge as well, we have attendees from all over Canada today. So I will also state my respect and acknowledgement of the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the First Nations peoples throughout our provinces and territories. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. This event was developed in response to feedback from our CE community after our first such event, which was in May last year. A great majority of our respondents expressed interest in a similar event with concrete goals and strategies that they can take away and some ready-to-use tools with their students. So this is our plan today. I'm going to describe further in our learning objectives coming up. And I just wanted to quickly mention my deep gratitude for all the help and support that Lee and I have received from Cheryl and from the SAS faculty and staff to bring this to fruition. I hope today is beneficial for everyone here. So let's go. Some housekeeping to start. You've heard me say this a few times, but just to, if possible, rename yourself so we can see your first and last name clearly, just to help us with surveys afterwards. We also would like participants wherever possible to keep your video on, just so we can enable some more organic conversation and keep the event as interactive as we can. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. Panelists are going to answer your questions as they come up, so it will be a first come, first serve basis. And if you have a question or a comment that you would like to share, we do suggest that you introduce yourself, your profession, and where you work as well. And then if your question is not answered and the event is coming to a close, we can type it into the chat. All right. So our learning objectives for today are as follows. Participants learn practical, ready-to-use strategies to foster successful learning environments with students during externships. So break that into two. Participants will describe strategies to help with setting expectations before and during an externship. Participants will identify strategies regarding receiving feedback on students, and participants will have the opportunity to connect with panelists and the clinical community to ask them questions and offer them strategies. So, some introductions. I'm going to allow each of our panelists to lead with their introductions. So it looks like first up we have Jeff.
Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Rowell, speech path for about 8 years now, grad of UBC. I've taken like 6 or so students over the years. My answers mostly revolve around where I worked recently, which was at Surrey Memorial's High Intensity Stroke Unit, which is an inpatient unit. That's where most of my practicum students have been. I've recently switched jobs to do a bit more work privately. So I work at Speechies part-time. I work at Burnaby Hospital doing outpatient rehab 2 days a week. And I also work for myself a few days a week.
Thanks, Jeff. Awesome. Next up, we've got Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Douglas. I'm an audiologist in Saskatoon and many years ago UBC grad. And I've taken many students over the years. In my first position, which was in the hospital at Royal University Hospital in Saskatoon for many, many years. And then now in my own private practice for the last 5 years. And I am lucky to have the opportunity to have students from Canadian and US programs. So different levels of competency as well in terms of where they are in their training. And yeah, I find having students is really great for me as well, because I learn a lot and we have a lot of fun together. So hopefully we can have some dialogue today that'll be useful to everybody.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. We have Keely.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keely, and I've been a speech pathologist since, well, I graduated from UBC in 2001, and I've been working specifically with Vancouver Coastal Health, a preschool speech and language team, since 2006. And I've taken many students over the years, and I really enjoy it, not only as a way to give back to UBC, but also I learned so much by having students. And I really encourage all of my colleagues to take students because it's a wonderful experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Just to check, can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Excellent. Okay. I did also want to add, we had another audiology panelist, Sarah Barnes, who has her private practice here to understand. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today. However, she's passed some notes on to Cheryl, who will be able to share them as needed. Perfect. Okay, so our organizers then, I'll allow my partner Lee to introduce himself.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Lee, audiologist at VGH, and Rachel and Cheryl, we are excited about this event, and we want to hear from you. We want to build a community for our CE educators, and we believe the students are our future. So let's do everything we can do to help them. And also, like everybody said, it's a two-way learning. We improve ourselves as well when by tutoring students. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lee. There's myself too. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I am the SAS Clinical Faculty Rep for SLP. I work in BC Cancer. I also work privately with Speechies like Jeff. Yeah, I have a toddler in addition, so I'm kept busy. But I have taken this position and I enjoy doing this because just like Lee, I find that students help me to learn just as much as anything else. It really is a two-way street. It's a really rewarding and enriching experience to date for me. And I hope that we can make that an experience more broadly for all of our awesome CEs. So that's me. And we're going to finish with introducing Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's so wonderful that we have 72 participants so far. My name is Cheryl McGee. I'm one of the clinical coordinators on the ACE team. I am a speech to language pathologist. I've done most of my clinical practice in Alberta, in Calgary, in a variety of settings, acute care, inpatient rehab, and schools. I've been in this clinical practicum coordinator position now for 5 years, and part of my role is to do outreach like this to our wonderful, amazing, supportive clinical community. And I'm really happy to have collaborated with Rachel and Lee on this project. Thank you.
Okay. So before we got into our panelist questions, we just wanted to run a quick poll, which should pop up on your screen soon, because we're curious to know where you're all from and your backgrounds. So please take a couple seconds just to answer it for us.
Can everyone see it? Sometimes my polls don't always work out well. There's 4 questions. I think we have 73 participants, so we're just waiting for a few more.
Oh, the mystery other.
All right, so far we have about 72% SLPs, 22% audiologists, 1% team leader manager, 7% staff, faculty or staff, and 1 other. Oh,
Awesome.
sorry. Okay. I see. They've all launched at the same time. Okay. And the majority of us are working in BC. 94% of us are here from BC, 4% from Alberta, 1 from Ontario. Hello, Ontario. Hello, Alberta. And I forgot to mention that panelists can also participate as well, because we also have Charlotte from Saskatchewan.
And I see about 64% are answering yes to have you supervised students before, and about 23% no. And then that nice optional extra, 14% yes, but it's been a while. Awesome.
Great. And then just where we're working at, 17% in acute care, 16% in a rehab hospital or a center, 7% in long-term care, 12% in a school district, 20% in a public health center or a unit, 19% in a child development center, 6% at university, and 34% other. I'll have to work on diversifying for the next poll. Thank you everyone so much for participating in that. It's really nice to know where everyone is coming from today.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to move on to our first question. So our first question is around setting expectations. We're going to ask our panelists today, what strategies do you use to encourage a successful learning environment for the student prior to the placement, at the beginning, and during? And we're going to start with Keely.
And Rachel, do you want me to touch on each prior, beginning, and during?
Ideally, for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were going to take turns for each one. So in terms of prior to a placement, usually students email us a few weeks before. And during that time, when I respond to their email, I share information specifically about where I work, which is the Ravensong Community Health Center in Vancouver, talking about dress code, what hours I work and what hours I expect them to work, and sometimes any assessment tools or therapy materials that they could potentially familiarize themselves with before the placement. And our students who come to our health center or other health centers in Vancouver get training in our information system, which is Paris, prior to their placement, which I find really helpful. So we don't have to spend time getting them trained during the placement. And a word of advice that I sometimes give to students and my colleagues do as well is that think of this as your first job. So, make sure to be on time and dress appropriately and be prepared. Bring, a pen and a notepad or clipboard, so you have everything that you need ahead of time, and you're not sort of scrambling or having to ask your CE for materials. So that's prior to the placement. And then at the beginning of the placement, I generally provide a half-day orientation. And I have a document that a colleague of mine put together that I'm using. And it just has information about the site, the placement expectations, orientation to all of our therapy materials and assessment tools. I make sure to take the student around the health center and introduce them to the other professionals that we work with and make referrals to, namely our public health nurses. And generally, I do not book any clients during that first morning, just so we can have lots of time to get familiarized with each other and to the site, and have the student have an opportunity to ask me any questions they might have. I also make sure to talk to the student about their learning style and their learning objectives, and find out what they hope to gain from the placement. So what their experience is working with specific disorders, even just with preschoolers, and any other skills that they bring to the placement. I also try during that orientation to provide examples of case notes, if we have time, and reports for various disorders. So I can share with students a report template, for example. So when they are asked to start writing reports or even case notes, they have something to kind of look at and go from. And I also, during that orientation, make sure to schedule our midterm evaluation and our final evaluation, just so we have that time set aside already, and we don't have to kind of scramble to find that time in our schedules during the placement. So that's at the beginning. And then during the placement, I really encourage students to jump in very soon after observing, and just to be comfortable being uncomfortable, essentially. To be comfortable making mistakes. I remind them that I'm there, and I stay in our office, or my office, the whole time. I don't generally leave. So basically, I'm there to provide a giant safety net in case they need me to jump in, or if they have a question, or they're struggling. I just usually say, just give me a look, and I can jump in if you need me to. Encouraging them not to be afraid to ask questions, right? There's no bad question. And also questioning why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. And I love having different ideas of how to approach, a child that I'm working with, or a different disorder. So it really makes me think, why am I doing it this way? Could I do it a different way? And often we can, and that's the beauty of our jobs. There's no one right way to do it. And then making sure that I build in time after every session to discuss how the session went, rather than rushing from one client to another and forgetting maybe to talk about something that I observed, or the student forgetting to ask a question that they might have had. I also ask students prior to the midterm to fill out, there's a student feedback to clinical educator at midterm form. So I like them to fill that out, because then I can find out if there's anything that I'm not doing that they would like me to be doing to help facilitate their learning for the remainder of the placement. And then also there's the feedback at the final evaluation form that helps me as a clinical educator to learn how I can improve and do things differently for future students. So that is everything.
Thank you so much, Keely.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Okay. And next, I'm going to move to Charlotte.
Okay, well, Keely, you pretty much covered most things I was going to mention, so I'll just add a few more things. For us, we get students, and I'm sure a lot of other CEs do too, from a lot of different programs. So a lot of my preparation is making sure I'm clear on what the particular program is wanting the student to be getting out of the placement, and making sure I've reviewed all of the information about the program, whether it's a student on their first placement or a student on their final placement. We have very different expectations, obviously. And quite often we'll have like a final placement externship, maybe a UD student here at the same time that we might have an initial student. And that's kind of nice as well for the students to know that there's going to be another student that maybe they can also bounce ideas off of and get some feedback from. So I like that, as thinking back to when I was a student, it can be very anxiety provoking. Quite often when they're coming to Saskatoon, we have to spend quite a bit of time just helping them to figure out where they're going to stay, and issues around transportation and the appropriate clothing, right? Because when it's 40 below in the middle of winter, you want to have proper clothing. And make sure they're comfortable with all of that. And as I say, assist them in any way we can to start with. Also providing them with a lot of information ahead of time about what equipment we have in the office. So that, and if they're not familiar with that equipment, if they feel like they want to do a bit of research on our equipment and some of the protocols we might have in the office ahead of time, we're totally happy for them to do that. But particularly when it's an initial student, I'm really careful not to pile too much on them to start with. We really, that first week that they're in the office, we're pretty easy with them, because we want them to be very comfortable with the setting. So prior to the placement, you know, now they're coming to our office. When I was at the hospital, it was very different than in my own clinic. There were some protocols around the hospital as well that they had to become familiar with. In my clinic, obviously, when they're coming in, we let them know that also that they're going to have all the masks and gloves and everything else they're going to need, and any other infection control. Make sure that they're comfortable with all of those protocols. And then that first, depending on what level of externship they're on, if they're in an initial externship, you know, that first week that they're with us, it's a lot of observation and playing around with the equipment, because a lot of times any piece of equipment can be pretty daunting to any of us, right? Even I know anytime I get something new, it takes me a little while to get used to it. And throughout every day that we're with the student, making sure we're giving lots of feedback. And I always try to start with the positive first, because I know what it's like when you're the student. I mean, even though I've graduated many, many years ago, anytime you're learning something new and you're trying something new, you know, you need to feel good about what you're doing. And so we always try to start with the positive and then provide any additional feedback, some recommendations. Or maybe we want to practice that together. Maybe you want to practice that with one of our other students that we have in the office, just so that you're comfortable with the protocol that we're using, because we do a lot of different populations in our office, a lot of different types of procedures. So we want the student to feel very comfortable and let us know if they don't feel comfortable. So we don't want to get to the point where somebody feels that they have to get really upset about something before they say anything to us. And we never want that to happen. So we really want them to feel comfortable to actually come up to us and talk to us and ask for assistance if they need it, but also maybe if they're not feeling comfortable about what we're doing, that they let us know that as well. So, and throughout the placement, I mean, we're giving them feedback. I like to have feedback outside of those clinical educator feedback forms at any point. And those reviews that we have to do throughout the placement, yes, we schedule time as well to do those. And yeah, I just have to build some fun into it too. We have a lot of fun. Our students are part of our little family at the office, and they go on the road with us when we're going on clinics, and it's a lot of fun for them. So that's all I'll say right now.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. That's fantastic. Jeff.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that I've recently switched jobs, and most of the feedback I have, or the points I'm going to make, represent just one location. And I'm listening closely for feedback too, as I kind of take on students for different placements, because, you know, having high intensity stroke rehab in a public unit is a lot different than private practice. So there's plenty that I don't know, but what I do know is you just make it work, and it's always fun. So what do I do prior to placement? So just like the others have said, I touch base with them through email. I like to hear what experience they've had with the specific population that I work with. When I first took students, that was kind of it, but over time I've adapted as I've kind of accumulated a few more resources. So now I send out a little package that a coworker made with reviewing evidence-based practice for aphasia. I asked them to kind of review some of those things, not to be perfect at it, just to have something to go through. And then we do try to kind of try some of those therapy approaches during the placement as opportunities arise. So it's about the most organized I get beforehand. On the first day, I like to have a little candid conversation about like, is this the population you even want to work with? And lots of them say no. I'm not offended, like that's okay. We can adapt their learning plan because, if they're not interested in dysphagia, like let's not waste our time. Let's, UBC or whoever needs you to have a certain skill set. Let's work on that. But tell me what you really want to focus on, and we can have fun doing that instead. A specific strategy that I like to use is at the beginning of a placement, I would like the student to show me that they can do it the same way that I do it, knowing that it's not the best way and it's not the only way. And towards the end of the placement, I want them to show me how they would adapt it and make it their own. It's helpful to learn the skills, take my SMART goals, take my therapy plan, do it exactly as I do it, watch me do a session, replicate it, basically verbatim, show me that you can do it, and then adjust it because it doesn't have to be the same as mine. Set reasonable expectations. And I like to set SMART goals and focus on the theme of setting SMART goals right from the very beginning, because there's so much utility within a session too. If you can write a good SMART goal, you can adapt sessions on the fly too. So it's a really good skill to focus on and kind of continue throughout the placement. And so, yeah, it might be a couple days before they start doing their own sessions, but I encourage them to just dive right in. If their learning style is to be they're okay with a bit of risk, go ahead, have a session. If you're fine crashing and burning, I'll be there to support you. If you'd rather kind of be a bit more tentative and careful about it, we can let you practice or take some ownership of one or two activities first. Just have that conversation with your students about what they prefer. And it's always been okay. During the placement, I do ask the students how they prefer to receive feedback. So like their learning styles. But I also let the students know what my feedback style is too. I'm very just kind of off the cuff. I love going on these tangents of discussions, and my poor students just kind of have to deal with it. So I try to adapt and adjust to give them what they want from their perspective, but also to make sure that I get what I want from my perspective too. I love UBC's handbook and the resources they provide. I just have a stack of those written feedback forms that I keep with me in my binder, and I whip them out and write stuff down. There's so much variety that we do as speech therapists, especially like communication therapy. And I think all of us, especially in our first jobs, have experienced that. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing, what's the right answer to all these things. But that's just the reality of our profession, and the students are going to feel it too. And what I feel we can do for our students is help them experience that uncertainty with a bit of guidance. So once they are on their own, they're not so surprised and shocked by it. So I encourage them to, like in a session, if you're not 100% perfectly planned out, just try it out anyways. I'll be there if you need my help, but just you'll survive it, get through it. You'll come up with some creative ways of adapting it. And for them to focus on the flexibility and creativity side of our profession rather than the I know all the right answers, because we often don't have right answers. Yeah, use the bunch of feedback forms. I like the written feedback forms. And then something that I like to add to them is a few notes, like a food for thought note, not necessarily criticism or feedback. It's just, yeah, like an interesting idea came up. Let's have a further discussion about it. So I try to carve out some time during the day or in between sessions where we might be able to have that more deep conversation to kind of integrate theory. And then I asked them about, when would you like to receive feedback? Is it in the middle of a session? Is it in between sessions? Or should we kind of write it all down and, before lunch, spend 20 minutes trying to review everything at that point? Whatever the case, just like our patients or our clients, everyone's different, everyone's adaptable. It's kind of fun to challenge yourself to doing things a little bit differently. And so long as the student is up for it, there's so many creative ways that you can adjust it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That's awesome. Cheryl, do you think there's anything from Sarah's notes that's different or worth noting?
Yeah, I'll just add a few things from Sarah. So at the beginning of the placement, I generally show the student around and try to make them feel as comfortable as possible. I introduce them to team members and let them know if they have any concerns, they can come talk to me. I try to keep it informal to put the students at ease. I talk with them and ask them what are the ways they learn the best. This is the same for feedback. I know that's been mentioned before. I try to let students take control of their own learning instead of dictating what they should know. So instead of me dictating what they should know. And then Sarah just says communication and a positive atmosphere is the most important for a successful learning environment. I just wanted to add one thing as a strategy at the beginning of placement that I've implemented at some of my sites is an orientation binder for students. So for any SLP that's taking any student, not only from UBC, but any Canadian program, it's nice to have an orientation binder ready to go. So let's say readings that you think the student would benefit from, report templates. I know Keely, you've mentioned that already. Any examples of chart notes or progress notes or anything that you would think that would benefit the student. It takes a little bit of time to organize this binder, but I found it was a really great strategy to have in place because we know and we tell clinical educators all the time that students do not need to be attached to clinical educators at all points of a placement. So when you need your downtime, when you need to check your email, when you need to do your other work besides mentoring a student, it's great to have this orientation binder and set up the student with something to do as a sort of a different task. So we found that that really worked as a successful strategy for us at one of the inpatient hospitals in Calgary.
Amazing. Okay, perfect. So we are going to move on to question number 2, which is subdivided. So we're going to start. Yes.
Rachel, should we ask if anyone has any questions at this point, or if they have their own strategies that they would like to share with the group about, you know, what they do prior or beginning or during the placement?
We absolutely can. I see Marsha has her hand up. Go ahead, Marsha.
Yeah, you know, I think we are all in the business of supporting other humans. And sometimes we're very shy about using certain types of words. I fully support any clinical educator that uses the word expectations. They are actually looking to hear from you what you expect, either behavioral or technical or performance wise. So please don't shy away from words. Your students will want to know and they won't want to have to guess. So don't be shy about using really explicit terms like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then we have Disha. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. So I am an SLP working at Monarch House, and it's going to be my first time that we will be starting to take students in. So it's my first time. So if it's a very silly question, please avoid. But I would just like to know if we have some templates, about the feedback forms, that we provide to the students. If we have anything like that, it'll be great. That's it. I think that was just my question.
That's a great question that I'm going to hand over to Cheryl.
Hi, Disha. It's so nice to meet you. I invited Disha yesterday to this event. I'm glad that you can make it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our community of practice. We have a clinical educator community of practice website, and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of this session. But it's like a one-stop shop for clinical educators, and it's taken a few years for the clinical education team to develop. It was Evan Sindin's idea, and she's here. She's another clinical coordinator on our team, and she's here today. Thank you for attending, Evan. But we have all of the things that clinical educators will need for their placements with students. So clinical educator handbooks, forms, feedback forms, orientation videos. We have a whole bunch of new modules that I'll talk about at the end as well. So I'll pop some of those things in the chat for everyone, but I will talk about it again at the end.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And then we have a hand up from Nicole.
Hello, I just wanted to mention, I think that for us here, Kelowna Interior Health, I think what we need to do is the students are coming with all those great handbooks, which is so awesome. But I think we need to take some time away from our busy schedules to have more organized for when they do arrive, because I do think that's where some of the stresses and pressures come, is just we don't take enough time to be prepared for when they come. So we need some more standard work at our end. Because as you know, we are running, we don't have time to discuss, and we want to be able to do that. So I think those resources at the receiving end would be something that's worth some development.
That's a really nice thought. Thank you so much. Perfect. Okay, I don't see any more raised hands, so I'm going to give another opportunity just in case. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for your thoughts. We're going to move on.
Rachel? I just noted Naomi Smith's comment in the chat. Would anyone be willing to share a copy of their orientation binder, or at least a list of the contents, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel or forget to add something useful? That's a great idea. I can definitely take a look at my resources from when I worked clinically for like a table of contents. And I could post something like that on our community practice and or share that with the attendees that came to this event today. If anyone else has an orientation binder or orientation ideas, let me know. Maybe contact me directly, and we can get some brainstorming going on that sort of strategy.
Perfect. Okay. So for question number 2, I'm watching the time and I'm mindful of that. So I'm going to adapt these slightly. So I wonder if each of our panelists could tell us one strategy you use when providing verbal and written feedback to a student. And this time we are going to start with Jeff.
So over the placements, I found that I like to revolve around the SMART goal format, whether it's in the written feedback forms through UBC or kind of impromptu. I like to ask the student to be reflective of how they managed to run the session according to their own SMART goals. If everything went well and as planned, I asked them to maybe creatively think of one way of adjusting their format or their feedback, or one element of the therapy session just for practice, adapting one element of that SMART goal format. Or if something didn't go as planned, we had the chance to also reflect on that. And using this kind of format allows it to remain structured, and it also allows them to practice kind of stepping up goals or adjusting goals, whether they're short-term or long-term. And so I like that kind of structured format.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, and we're going to move on to Charlotte.
I always do that. So I'm not quite as formal as Jeff. I like your ideas though. But throughout the day, we're constantly talking to our student, and I mean, things are doing well. We're letting them know that things that maybe they might want to either try a different way or improve or expand upon. Throughout the day, I try to be providing some of those comments, and towards the end of the day, kind of touch base with each other about, you know, what worked well, what maybe we could change for the next time, but always trying to start with the positive. And yeah, so again, I'm fairly informal outside of when we have to do the actual written evaluations.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then Keely.
Yeah, similar to Charlotte, I keep it fairly informal. Sometimes I use the written feedback form to jot down notes as the session is going on, but really just using like the feedback sandwich. So I start with something positive, followed by something that maybe they could improve upon, and then followed by something else positive. But initially starting with asking the student, so what do you think went well? What did you find that worked during that session? And then alternatively, what maybe could you have done differently?
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. And then we're going to move on to our second question. So strategies that you use to help a student receive constructive feedback and then how to implement that feedback. So we're talking about how we can help a student to receive feedback and then to implement that feedback. Okay, and this time we are going to start with Charlotte.
I think there a large part of it is just having a real comfort between you and the student right from the start, and having very open communication, because I never come out with a negative comment towards the student, like, oh, you shouldn't have done that, or you didn't do that right. I'll just say, there's some great things you did there. And, I found this maybe was a challenge when I did it for the first time, and maybe this might be something you might want to try. And just to keep it so that they don't feel threatened, because a lot of times, especially if it's a new student, that anything that might make them feel like they really don't know what they're doing can really kind of destroy them, right? So I'm always very mindful of that. And so I don't usually find I have a lot of trouble with students taking feedback and giving me feedback too. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have Keely next.
Yeah, I like to point out what I've forgotten or what I struggle with still. Just because I've been working for many years doesn't mean I always do everything perfectly. So I make a point of pointing those things out so that when I am giving feedback to the student, they're not feeling, oh, I'm the only one who maybe is struggling with this. Something that some colleagues of mine mentioned, I've never done this, but I'm really curious to try it, is doing video feedback. So recording a session and then letting the student watch it afterwards to really see and identify what they were actually doing well, how the client or the child and the parent were responding. We do that with our clients, for the parents, we do video feedback for them. So why not do it for a student? I think it could be a really powerful way for them to get constructive feedback themselves.
Perfect. Okay, and then we have Jeff.
Yeah, I think a similar theme with everybody is when you have that relationship with the student, and when you allow yourself to put yourself out there and let your student see the mistakes or the insecurities you might have, or just the difficulty dealing with your caseload, it allows them the permission to also not be perfect. And I think that's what's so important for our profession. And if you can embrace the wiggle room, you can help demonstrate that to your students, and hopefully they observe that security and that confidence you have too. Again, with my SMART goal strategy, what I do like to do is, instead of providing criticism, it's an opportunity to see which element of the SMART goal format can you adjust. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not bad. Is there something that you can use your theory to adjust slightly? And in doing that, it gives them a chance to not only tweak the session, but practice against setting goals and how to plan their therapy session. And like I mentioned earlier, if there's a session that has gone perfectly well or fantastic, it's also an opportunity to hypothetically see what might happen if you were to tweak one of those elements. Again, trying to develop that kind of that therapeutic rationale for adjusting things. So one example would be, if you're having trouble keeping data online, how can you cook that into your therapy plan? If you're not great at keeping track of data, what can you do to free up a bit of your cognitive load in order to track data? Or if you find that you're always giving the client the same feedback time again, I'll tell my students, like, you're not allowed to give that feedback. You have to brainstorm 5 different types. Your SMART goal for the session is you have to go through these 5 other, like, brainstorm them, and you have to use one of these other forms of feedback at least once in the session. It's not to say that they're bad or it's wrong. It's just challenging themselves to their own SMART goal and practicing adapting and modifying little elements of the therapy plan. And then it's not negative feedback, or it's not criticism, it's them practicing being flexible and manipulating little details to be a more effective therapist.
That's awesome, Jeff. That reminds me of something that Cheryl has also kindly reminded me we spoke about before. Just to give my own little addition, something that I do that serves a few purposes is before giving a feedback or running a feedback session, I'll ask a student to go and write down maybe 2 or 3 things that they feel went well, and then 2 or 3 things that they're curious about or they wonder if they want to work on. And I do this because I've had a few students who for, various reasons might run a little nervous or perfectionistic, and they find it very easy to criticize themselves, but they find it harder to say what's gone well. So that's been a nice tool when I've had students who maybe have a harder time really focusing on the positives and what is going well for them. And I really liked some of the feedback from Keely and Charlotte as well there. I'm also going to claim that I deliberately model making mistakes. The reality is I make mistakes, but I hope that by my own process of making my mistakes and how I respond to that then myself, how I invite feedback, how I adapt, I'm attempting to role model in some way that it's okay and it's part of the learning process. It's something that will continue to happen. And so long as we are confident that we know how to repair and that we know how to improve our knowledge base or do something differently, that's part of the art of clinical practice, right? So yeah, perfect. I'm just going to open the floor then.
Rachel, sorry,
Yes,
Rachel. I have just some input from Sarah.
Yeah.
For the second one. So what strategies does she use to help a student receive constructive feedback? I always let them know that constructive feedback is not a personal criticism. I'm providing helpful tips to improve so that they're more successful with the task. I really like using specific examples from appointments when I do give my feedback. It helps the student remember and learn for the next time. The student also makes notes on the feedback I give them. I also provide a lot of reading materials they can refer to. I also find role-playing scenarios very helpful, especially with counseling clients. And then I just wanted to provide one other strategy. I see in the chat that there's a conversation about the feedback sandwich. And Donald, I have read something about that as well. So one of these, hopefully you can see this. This is our clinical feedback. Oh, no, you can't. Our clinical feedback form. I'll put the link in the chat for everyone. But it says continue. So it's 4 squares or 4 boxes. So one of the boxes is continue. So what you want the student to continue with. The next box is start or do more. So what do you want to see the student start or do more of? Consider. So that's like your clinical reasoning, your higher level thought questions. And then discontinue or do less. It used to be stop, but I thought that was quite negative. So I changed it to discontinue or do less. So instead of maybe the feedback sandwich, or the positive sandwich, negative, positive, if clinical educators wanted to try this form, I'll pop it into the chat. But what I did when I was a clinical educator is I photocopied a whole bunch of these clinical feedback forms, put them in a duotang or a small little binder, and then just had it ready to go for every single student that I supervised. And I just wrote in the boxes, when we were having our sessions with the students and with the clients. So that's just one strategy that I thought was very positive and was useful for me when I was a clinical educator.
A really nice comment from Michelle there about the principles of emergent strategy when struggling with perfectionism. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. I'm going to go read up on that. Perfect. Okay, I see a couple of hands are raised. Lee, go ahead.
Hey, hello. Thank you, Rachel. I just want to share a few of my personal experience. I think how to provide feedback to students sometimes also depends on students' personality. And so some students, they can take feedback very directly. Sometimes you need to use a sandwich approach to teach them. And also the one thing I learned is to be, like Sarah said, it's not personal, it's being professional and also be supportive. And the other thing is I noticed, don't speak from the supervisor point of view, and you put yourself in a student's point of view to see the feedback. So that probably helps students to take it easier. And as for the sandwich approach, I don't think it's universal for everybody. Like, some students, they take it sandwich approach is more helpful, but for other students, just to be direct. And so it's easier for students to accept. So this is just my personal experience. So pretty much students' personality also play a role here, how you deliver your feedback to them.
Amazing, thank you. And Marcia.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't think I was going to say anything, but I'm so excited by the conversations that your event is eliciting. We don't want to say the sandwich is bad, And when I hear Keely and Charlotte and Jeff talk, I know you could make anything receivable. So it really isn't a technique so much as an alliance and a connection and a trust that you have already set up early with the student. And yes, personality matters, but I will say to you, they get a class and some instruction on feedback. And to get to grad school, you have to be a perfectionist. And I would have to say 90% of them are risk aversive. So when you listen to their reflections at the beginning of their time with us, they all talk about being an imposter. So if you take that into perspective, having yourself vulnerable and basically naked, and then entering into an alliance where you're getting really excellent feedback, but you're not used to it. It takes a little while for them to create a bit of a personal callus on themselves and to receive it. But I can say after you read, 10 months of reflections, they get it. And boy, do they appreciate the feedback, because they start to feel strong and they start to feel empowered about their learning. And I think it's just because of all the skills you have about having empathy and also being student focused. I really have to say we are so thankful that they get there, and they get there. So how you do it, don't worry about being perfect. If the intent is pure, if the trust is there, if you really are looking to support them and be authentic with them, you will get there. The feedback, it will come and it'll be received in the way you intend. So I just wanted to really encourage all of you to think past a technique, because it's obvious to me that the panel can generate and build these things in their learning environment. So, they can put anything into the middle of the sandwich. Yeah, please don't feel stuck. Okay, just be yourself.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. That's amazing advice. Okay, so I'm conscious of our time and that we're having a few people leave. So I just wanted to highlight that Cheryl has placed a feedback form in the chat box. If anybody has to run early, please do us the favor of clicking it and letting us know how you feel things have gone. So I am going to just move us along because I think Cheryl has a couple of updates for us. So, Cheryl.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I've already mentioned this already, our clinical educator community of practice. The clinical coordinators at UBC, of course, welcome your questions at all times. You can email us. We're going to give you our emails at the end of this session. But if you don't know where to look for a certain form or the clinical educator handbook or the orientation video, come to this website first. We're really encouraging everyone to check it out. Also today's event, for those that were not able to attend, the video recording will be posted. So I've mentioned all of those things already. I popped them in the chat already, but our next slide, Rachel, is new. So we have some new clinical teaching mini modules. That's the link for them right there. Marcia G. Oh, these are the old slides, sorry. Marcia and Marcia. So Marcia Choi and Marcia Goblack have worked on these together. Sorry, that was a typo. In collaboration with the Faculty of Medicine. So there's really, Marcia, do you want to talk about them since you and Marcia developed them?
Yes, the Faculty of Medicine made them for their clinical teachers, and they asked if we would like to have them, and they said we will even customize them for speech and Audie. So Marcia and Marcia, yes, we have exactly the same name, have really customized them, and we are so proud of them because they are foundational, but they also really set the tone that is modeled by our panelists and you. Yeah, please feel free to take a look at them. They are brand new as of 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and they were just made live. Jamie put them live yesterday on our community of practice. So thank you, Jamie, for that.
Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. We know how busy you all are. We deeply appreciate it. One more just reminder that we're getting a feedback questionnaire emailed to you, or you can click the link in the chat box. And thank you so much in advance for completing this. It helps us to design any future sessions so that we know exactly how we can meet your needs. We really do welcome your valuable feedback. Just as an extra surprise for attendees, we are also handing out some door prizes. So I'm going to hand over to Jamie.
Hello, everybody. I get the wonderful honor of announcing the 5 recipients of our fantastic door prizes. They will be gift cards courtesy of UBC SAS. So without further ado, the names that were randomly selected from the participant list are Kat Mumford, Lindsay Patterson, Naomi Smith, Claire Beldy, and Jamie Russell. So we will be in touch with you to discuss those. Congratulations.
Yay.
Yeah.
All right. And for our remaining folks, thank you. These are the different people to contact for different kinds of questions or thoughts. So if you have any specific questions relating to clinical education, you want to pass something along to SAS, Lee and I are essentially your voices. So you are always welcome to get in touch. These are the emails you can find us at. If you would like to speak directly with any of the academic coordinators of clinical education, you have for SLP, Marcia, Sandy, Cheryl, and Yvonne, and their emails. And if you need anybody on the clinical education audiology side, we have Sasha and Marcia. Just an extra few acknowledgements to those who've made this event possible. Jamie, we don't know what we would do without you. Thank you so, so much. Jamie is so integral to these events getting off the ground. Thank you so much to Valerie, of course, as well. Clint for helping to organize our gift cards and prizes today. All members of the ACE team, thank you deeply, as well as a really deep thanks to all SAS faculty and staff for their support. Okay, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you everyone so much for attending.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great to see
Bye.
you.